Hi, hello, welcome to Spell Day. We're covering a spell every single day of the year from the 5e PHB +3. Those specialty spells are homebrew spells. We're at +2 at the moment. You get back in playlist to find them, and today's spell is the World Builder's infamous Teleport.
I hate portals.
Seventh level Conjuration, casting time of 1 action, range of 10 feet, components verbal, duration instantaneous. This spell instantly transports you and up to 8 willing creatures of your choice that you can see within range, or a similar object that you can see within range, to a destination you select. If you target an object, it must be able to fit entirely within a 10-foot cube, and it can't be held or carried by an unwilling creature. The destination you choose must be known to you, and it must be on the same plane of existence as you. Your familiarity with the destination determines whether you arrive there successfully. The DM rolls a d100 and consults the table. And there's too many options and variables, so the table's probably to my left. Or you're right? I guess you're right? Yeah, my left, you're right. Stage right. Familiarity! Permanent circle means a permanent teleportation circle whose sigil sequence you know. Associated object means you possess an object taken from the desired destination within the last 6 months, such as a book from a wizard's library, bed linen from a royal suite, or a chunk of marble from a lich's secret tomb. Very familiar is a place you've been very often, a place you have carefully studied, or a place you can see when you cast the spell. Seen casually is some place you have seen more than once, but with which you aren't very familiar. Viewed once is a place you have seen once, possibly using magic. Ooh, description is a place whose location and appearance you know through someone else's description, perhaps from a map. False destination is a place that doesn't exist. Perhaps you tried to scry an enemy sanctum, but instead viewed an illusion. Or you are attempting to teleport to a familiar location that no longer exists. Okay, we'll touch on that, but those last two have implications. On target, you and your group or the targeted object appear where you wanted to. Off target, you and your group or the target object appear a random distance away from the destination in a random direction. Distance off target is 1d10 times 1d10 percentage of the distance that has to be traveled. For example, if you tried to travel 120 miles, landed off target and rolled a 5 and a 3, then you would be off by 15% or 18 miles. The DM determines the direction off target randomly by rolling a d8 and designated 1 as north, 2 as northeast, 3 as east, and so on around the points of the compass. If you were teleporting to a coastal city and wound up 18 miles out at sea, you could be in trouble. Okay, well, we're going to talk through all of these a bit later. But I just want to make this point right here. There are scatter rules. Why don't they use them anywhere else? Similar area, you and your group or the targeted object wind up in a different area that visually or thematically is similar to the target area. If you're heading for your home laboratory, for example, you might wind up in another wizard's laboratory or in an alchemy supply shop that has many of the same tools and implements as your laboratory. Generally, you appear in the closest similar place, but since the spell has no range limit, you could conceivably wind up anywhere on the plane. Mishap. The spell's unpredictable magic results in a difficult journey. Each teleporting creature or the target object takes 3d10 force damage, and the DM re-rolls on the table to see where you wind up. Multiple mishaps can occur, dealing damage each time. Lot to touch on there. So let's talk through it, almost repeating what I was already mentioning, but when it was covering the familiarity of an object. You saw the table, that can determine a lot of things, while also determining leaves it entirely vague like familiarity is within this book. But let's start with the circle, teleportation circle, which is coming up, I think it's tomorrow, where that's not always going to be the best case scenario, or not always just a guaranteed option, but it is the best case scenario of like a predefined location to instantly head to. Whereas with a circle, you need to draw out another circle you're standing on or be at another one. With teleport, again, you cast it, you just appear at appropriate circle. It's not bad, guaranteed to work, no mishap. It's perfect, right on spot. Associated object brings up a lot of questions, namely the 6 months portion. So yes, and location, an object that's been in that location. I have my own ruling for it, both to reflect the setting, but not necessarily to reflect exactly what these rules state. So this one, it says like a wizard's tome, a bit of stone from a crypt of some lich's tomb. There's also like linens on a bed. Now, the tombstone, or the stone from that tomb, likely has been there for a long, long time, over 6 months. The book could be feasibly sitting there in a library for a long time. The linen's probably changed, or at least moved and washed to some extent. Like, what determines a location? And what's the broad scope of that location? Is it right where the item was? And is it specifically where the item was when you found it and picked it up? Is it where it usually sits? Is it just when it first entered the area and then you grab it? Is it once you first use it as a teleport, then the timer starts ticking over for 6 months? This leaves a lot of questions as to what actually determines it and why 6 months? Yes, it boils down to mechanics, but let's mess around here. So the way I rule it is it has to be something that has been basically relatively in the same exact spot for 6 months. Yes, it could have been bumped, it could have been nudged, it could have been placed down, but basically like a symbol, if it's been moved more than 10 feet, it doesn't count. And just as it's 6 months on the timer for how long you can use it, it's 6 months it has to be in that location. So roughly mirroring a year, at least the classical year of 12 months. But there's also the question of the fact that with a circle, you're appearing in the center of the circle. That's a set location. When it's an object, is it exactly where you picked up that object last and took it away from the destination? Or is it somewhere around there? Because a lot of people just pick up like a single rock from a city and it's like, oh, well, we'll just teleport around the city. I'd argue that's a different location, and thus they would only appear right where they picked it up. Not to mention for like trade caravans, this is another object to look out for, as in like, oh, is this some kind of relic that hasn't been touched for a long time, but over those 6 months has made it way over to your side of the world. Maybe wizards have people specifically ship items in so that they can then use it for this. Because it doesn't have to be anything special, just something that stayed still for 6 months. Though if you don't have something permanent like the circle or an item that was specifically located there, even very familiar, as in like, let's say it's a city you grew up in, or lived in, or spend most of your time in, you still have a chance of a mishap. That instantly brings the entire reliability of the spell down. Only 5%. But again, just like with, when it comes to an adventurer or high-level character, which likely this is being cast by because it's a 7th level spell. Okay, but hear me out here, because of the way it can be ruled. Okay, once we get to mishap, we'll touch it. Well, actually, hold on to that thought. Hold on to the thought that this can still mishap. We'll touch on it when we get to mishaps. Seen casually is like very familiar, but it's just not as much, so maybe not the hometown you grew up in, but just a place you visited once or twice. Viewed once specifically includes seeing through magic. Does that mean other spells that rely on a sight component, in this case seeing it, kind of can be used with magic or seen through magic and then still cast? It's a question that comes up there. Also, description. Any paintings, maps, those values instantly skyrocket. The more accurate they are. Because then you could have, like imagine a weird waypoint map. It would work like a waypoint map in some video games, but essentially you'd have a large map of the region. It comes up, and this wizard has scribbled down specific notes around certain sections of that map so they can visualize where it is, and then also have a description of it just underneath, after they've been there. Then you can argue that, yes, it's just seen casually at that point. So why would you need description? Other people using it? But now, if this is a precedent and a common one, I'm imagining how many maps actually have like written descriptions or like really artistic focuses on, like a really artistic focus on specific depictions of like hotspot locations, like cities, specific shrines, like those ancient artistic maps that are basically just like nothing in the land outside of like vague woods, and then a city has almost an art piece placed there. Because a basic map might not be enough, even though it says like maybe a map, maybe something with just a bit of sketches or just a proper cartography doesn't work. It needs to be something like that weird sketching. Then again, that's up to GM or DM. Not to mention as well with description, people telling you this, oral histories of ancient legends, which then we head into false destination. Wrong information, false description, the city's not really looking like that anymore. Things like that. That's bad. You're not gonna land on your target or even anywhere close. Similar, not close. And really, really likely to mishap. Which, well, I mean, we'll touch on those. One of the big things though is the illusion statement there. Because I'm trying to think because it says specifically a situation if you're trying to scry on an enemy's sanctum and what you actually saw was an illusion. Can an enemy set up a false destination, or just an entire illusion somewhere that doesn't even make sense, but they have an illusion of a castle somewhere with like Mirage Arcane. And then if anyone tries to scry on it, it goes to the illusion and not the real place. Or even if you just throw an illusion on top of it, does that just disrupt because it's not an actually seeing it? You're seeing the illusion, not the actual location. Not to mention, scrying can pick up illusions. To what extent? Does damaging illusions go through? Does that count as the person viewing it? And technically being within its area of effect if the sensor is? Weirdly, this brought up more questions about illusion and the scry spell. But that's not the focus of this. Probably a topic for later. Right now, back to teleport. In short, you can use illusions to sabotage what people are looking at and what they're basing their teleport off of. Now we have the situations you can end up in. On target, does as it says, it works. The spell works as intended. The fact that this is one of 4 options brings questionable reliability. Next one, off target, which I will now argue is worse than similar area. Even though similar area is... okay, both of these could be really bad. Similar area and off target. But they could also be alright. Like, it could bring you to a similar area that's just close by. And with off target, it could just be like a mile out. No problem, you recognize the landscape, you can find your way to where you were heading. But it can be, both of those can be so bad. Namely because of off target. Yes, it brings up the example of the ocean, which, by all accounts, is awful. Because, alright, essentially, guaranteeing traveling anywhere long distance with teleport is highly risky, because every other option, except maybe similar area, has a chance of going horrifically wrong. Because we're now running with the benefit and the assumption, even though it doesn't state it, you could be in the air. Off target could also just mean up. Though likely we are going to assume you're on land somewhere, but if you include verticality into it, it would be something fun. Potentially just lethal, of just throwing them somewhere up. Probably turn away from that for the benefit of like the players and the use of the spell, especially since similar area is still relatively grounded. So I wouldn't assume it just chucks you up somewhere. Your feet are planted. On what material is where it changes. You could be up in a tree. You could be on a mountaintop, the bottom of a canyon, the edge of a canyon, in the Underdark. Well, yeah, verticality, we're not counting that as having a solid footing. A cave somewhere underground? Yeah, that's still 18 miles off from your destination. And the ocean one, anything long distance. Even if we're not taking into account the potential like verticality changes of heading into the Underdark on accident, or other cave systems, or just hazardous terrain. Magma, heading into a volcano. Yes, maybe unlikely, still a possibility. But the big possibility, the ocean. The ocean. That is not a fun place you want to be. Namely because if you're burning a spell slot of this level, you need one of higher to then use teleport again to get out of it. Because if you don't have one, you have to wait till you can have a full long rest. Good luck trying to have that in the middle of the ocean. So heading anywhere that's like, oh, we're gonna teleport over to that other continent. If it goes off target, it then also scatters. You don't even know if you're gonna land inland. And if you're heading to any coastal area, this is a death trap. People might specifically only target teleportation hubs in like inland areas, just to not risk falling into the ocean somewhere. Because the worst that percentage could be is 100% off target. As in, you head the full distance you were trying to travel in some other direction. Well, from that point you were going to make it, and then you just essentially ricochet off that point. That can be bad. Not to mention just Antarctica, North or South Pole, in the middle of an enemy territory. Depending on how far you're traveling, you can be thrown far. It doesn't have to be the open landscape either. You can appear in the middle of a dungeon. You could just be in someone's dungeon now. In a boss room. In the middle of a ritual somewhere. Maybe your setting has focal points of teleportation and that's what you're drawn to? Or you accidentally get ricocheted to some other, like, summoning circle? Or in the middle of someone's kitchen. Or big pot. In a dragon's lair. Underneath a swamp. Why not? Undead graveyard. Basically, think of every dangerous possible location within a fantasy setting, and off target has a chance of sending you to it. With variables, yes, but those variables are so wild, there's a decent chance of all of those ideas, if you're going far distance. Short distance, probably a bit safer, because the percentage can't be that screwed up. But in like late game campaigns where adventurers are teleporting across continents, that's bad. That's really bad. Similar area. Okay. Can be alright. But just as off target, giving us the example of the ocean, showing that it can be in terrain that is undesirable, similar area can also be thus undesirable. Namely in the sense that it says, like, oh yeah, it might be somewhere close by that's a similar looking area, has similar equipment and surroundings, but also theme. Theme. What does it mean by theme? If you're heading to a magically charged area, like some great Arcanist tower, castle, or like Archmage's Cabal or Council, and you just end up heading to some like rogue wild magic area. It's magically charged, there's a bunch of dangerous artifacts around, and powerful spellcasters. One of them's a Mageocracy, the other one's a Cultist of Sorcerers. Technically a similar area if we're judging by theme. And it says it can be close by, but it can also be anywhere on the same plane. There's not a percentage tied to that. Anywhere on the same plane. Especially tying it to theme. Ooh, that could be dangerous. That could be real dangerous. Because that is left so much up to interpretation. Like, if you're a DM, you could really mold this into something maybe worse than mishap. Like, yeah, heading to a church somewhere, a grand holy temple, you end up in some cultist cabal somewhere. Heading to some great shrine of the dead, you end up in some undead plague lands. Trying to teleport to some boat somewhere? Have fun being on any boat. Maybe even one that's sunk. That can be bad. But depending on the type of area you're heading to, it can be a bit better than off target. Basically, if the location you're heading to similar area-wise is a very, very specific point, like, it might not be that bad. However, with off target, depending on how far you're traveling, it can always get worse with the percentages. Similar area just has the caveat of sending you entirely somewhere else on the same plane. Now, infamous mishap. Now we're gonna touch on it. So, just like with the Storm of Vengeance video, Commoner, Soldier, Goblin. Yeah, they're dead if this goes wrong. But now for the second clause, which, like the previous two options, allows the DM to make it a lot worse. When you do get a mishap and the 3d10 force damage are rolled, it's rolled again by the DM. And a mishap can occur again. So the reason for the DM screen a lot of the time is to hide notes, but also to hide dice rolls. Fudging is an inbuilt mechanic in the game, both for the player's benefit and detriment. It's less for things directly affecting the party and more for fudging things that the NPCs and monsters are doing. Depending on how you DM, that scale and the situation, that scale can flip wildly on how much you fudge or if you do at all. But it is an inbuilt expected thing. And this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for fudging because the DM rolls it. This is the one grand clause to help DMs with teleportation. Because normally world building with teleportation is a terrifying thing, because it really sends ripples through how settings work. Just like sending did with communication, this does with transportation. I'd argue Teleportation Circle does that more, and it also builds into this spell on why this does it more, but both of those have their flaws. Again, that's tomorrow's video, or next video in this case, depending on when you're watching this. But you can make teleportation as dangerous as you want. Due to the options given to you and anything that is not on target, yeah, it can be lethal. Sometimes you can just rule it. If you don't follow the idea that you need to be grounded from where you're teleporting and where you're teleporting to, or at least where you're teleporting to, yeah, you can teleport in the air. Just flung somewhere. A wizard, like in Morrowind, just falling to your feet. But you could have it that, yeah, if you do get a mishap, it's death. NPCs rolling it, you can just say behind the screen that, yeah, they just kept getting the mishap option. Even if it was very familiar, the fact that there's a 5% chance of it, and because you're the DM, you can fudge those rolls and say that that was consistently 5% for... Yes, the percentages are very low. But theoretically, it is possible that it just consistently is a mishap over and over and over again. So it's just a potentially infinite amount of 3d10 force damage, potentially. Depending on how long the health holds of that creature and how much you fudge the rolls. Because mathematically, there is a chance. There's a chance you just keep rolling mishap. And with this being in the DM's hands, you can fudge it and say it just happens. When it comes to the player, you can fudge it in that case as well. You can say that teleportation is very lethal, or you can be entirely honest and it's based off what you rolled. But this ruling and this wording gives you that doorway so that in the majority of cases when teleporting, the teleportation spell is a very dangerous thing so that people just don't use it unless they need to. Or of course there's the circle or the object, which guarantees an on-target, making those things incredibly valuable to anyone that can pick up teleport. That was a lot of actually running through the mechanics and a touch of world building mixed into that. But player's hands, let's go. It's a get out of jail, a final evacuation. I don't want to walk across this continent, I'm gonna teleport there today. Especially if you have the circle or object, but even if you do have a mishap or similar area, you're a party of adventurers. Either you have multiple high-level spellcasters with you, and even if you don't, you have the health likely to tank those 3d10 if they come up. Now depending, again, this all entirely depends on the DM, because outside of the initial dice rolling for the potential possibilities of how screwed you might be, the final result of all of those is not up to a table or a roll, it is up to how the DM or GM, in this case, looks to how lethal and dangerous they want teleport to be. So when it comes to the world building of teleport, the true answer to that is up into the hands of the world builder. How lethal is it? How easy is it to teleport? What counts as a similar area? How can descriptions be used to manipulate this? But in the hands of the players, it's a good get out of jail free card or just travel card. Hopping over continents, different locations, instantaneously getting out of fights in a pinch, and getting far, far away in fights. Now to NPCs and world building, because the rest of this is a massive world building. I don't know what you're expecting with just this video. Because it's teleport. I mean, we even opened with it being a world builder's infamous spell. Because of one thing we haven't even touched on yet, objects. So first off, when it comes to objects, you can do anything up to a 10-foot cube. Has to fit within that space. You can't, however, teleport multiple objects at the same time, unless a creature is carrying them. So honestly, the most efficient way to transport multiple objects would be like a caravan, but it's just made up of the people you are sending with teleport, but they're basically purposely over-encumber people and then teleport. You also have your merchants and guards built into that to protect it. Also, it's creatures, so you could actually just bring pack mules. Yeah, you could be a single mage that can cast teleport, and then 8 pack mules. This now has to be a character. What are you buying? And it's just 8 mules behind him as he teleports out. But then when it comes to single objects still that you don't want to bring anyone else with, you can send artifacts, magic items, really important things. How much you trust sending that if you don't have an object or a circle? Probably debated. But also you could theoretically send bombs in a sense. If you have something equivalent to like an arcane explosion or cursed relic or item. Yeah. I mean, it's also similar to the plane shift situation we set up with the one spellcast with a group of demons or other entities and then plane shifting them with them back to the material realm. You can do the same with teleport. I know in my setting there's a group that is like, has a lot of really high magic people, and one of the scariest things about them is that they don't really send armies to deal with some locations, but they just have really elite, essentially the equivalent of really high level characters with them, 8 of them. Then they're the caster, they teleport in next to someone, hunt them down, kill them, teleport out. But if you have something equivalent to like a magical arcane nuke or bomb or plague, something that carries it at least, send it that way. Just teleport, even if it's a bit random, just teleport the object to some location within an enemy's country. And if you do have an item specifically from a throne room, it's ridiculous. Now also comes up to the question of location. How specific do you have to be with a location? Because if you just say, oh, I want to teleport to this continent, where are you going? That is not a specific location. Is that even a description? No? Where would they head? Does that fall under similar area and theme? But even if they're on target, it's only that? Basically, what do you get when your target's not specific? Like when the player just says, we want to travel to this continent. We don't have a specific area in mind. Does it automatically technically fail, but just not rolling for mishap? It just automatically defaults to similar area or off target. That's a question the spell brings up, as in it doesn't answer it, this question that comes up from it. So that's left up DM and GM again. And to round this out a bit, world building wise as well, you get to talk about what mishaps with conjuration look like. What does it look like when a teleport fails? What do wounds from a failed teleport look like? Do things from other realms happen to get their grips on you? Or are you teleporting through a separate location and creatures from that location are what damage you? Is it that the magic itself is just shunted back as if where you were going to teleport there was some interference or something in the way, and it's just this big wave of force that hits you? The spell imploding on itself. Or is it that when you teleport, you might not take all of you in the first go? I know that's the way I run it. Just, if you don't manage to take the whole of you and properly lock in a location on the other end, it still teleports parts of you somewhere. Where's a good question? 10 out of 10. I would say 9 out of 10, but there's 2 active mechanics in the spell that entirely get rid of any of the possible downsides and guarantee that it works as intended, or that you expect or hope. And it's only 7th level, not 8th or 9th. There's not a material cost component. It's an action. It's not a big like ritual teleport, like, ooh, quickly, we need to get out. So you can do the get out or like a quick teleport out or escape. Up to 9 creatures, that's including the caster. That's really good. That is really good. And it's not even touch. It's just a 10-foot range. It's not bad. Not bad at all. Unless you make it.